Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we got a special spoiler video for Duskmourn spoilers. Now I know there's some Bloomberg spoilers as well, and I'm going to cover that in a separate video probably next week. But today I just want to go over all the Duskmourn spoilers that we saw today and all the crazy combos I could think of and different synergies that are coming to standard in the near future. And let's take a look at the first card, which is Enduring Tenacity, which is a 4-mana 4/3 enchantment creature, Snake Glimmer. It says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And when it dies, if it was a creature, returns to the battlefield under its own control, and it's an enchantment. Now, there's a lot of sort of enchantments in this set, a lot of enchantment creatures. So I think that's going to be a theme. So to take note in standard, there's a lot of different things that interact with enchantments, like for example, Case File Auditor, which looks at the top 6 cards of your life to search for an enchantment. You could find this thing if you are using it for a combo. Repair and Recharge can return enchantments back from your graveyard to play. And this card, the ability of the card has sort of an infinite combo with Exquisite Bond, which says whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. And this says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So if you gain any life or the opponent loses any life, those continually trigger and does essentially infinite damage to your opponent. Anything that would like gain a lot of life, maybe even like in a Soul Sisters type deck, this could be quite good. There's some effects in older formats that gain a lot of life all at once, so that could be pretty powerful here. But in standard, we also have this Zur Eternal Schemer, which it turns non or enchantments you control into creatures. So when this thing dies, it comes back as an enchantment and not a creature. So then you can turn it back into a creature, notably with lifelink, which would also be useful with its first ability. But then if it dies, it would come back as an enchantment again. I believe this is how it works. Tell me if this is wrong, but I believe it would come back again as an enchantment, so basically would be unkillable if you just kept animating it again with Zur. So that sounds pretty cool, pretty fun. A lot of interesting synergies here with Enduring Tenacity. Next up, we've got the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, which is a 5-mana 6/5, and it's got a new ability. This is also an enchantment creature, so it kind of works with all the same stuff. You can find it, or it has other enchantment synergies. But it has a new ability, Impending 4 for 3 mana, and it says if you cast the spell for an impending cost, it enters with 4 time counters on it. Isn't a creature until the last is removed. At the beginning of your end step, remove a time counter from it. I'm also not sure how exactly this would work with if you impending it and you have Zur and you turned it into a creature. Probably would work the same. But the ability of the card is that when it enters or attacks, you create a tapped colorless land token named Everywhere. That is every basic land type. Kind of funny, Everywhere is every land type. But this could work well with sort of domain cards, I was thinking, because the land type is every land, so it would fully charge up your Brawler or any other domain cards that you have. I was thinking about how to kind of use this impending effect. There's a card Scroll Shift, which can blink an enchantment. So if you played this for its impending cost and then you blinked it, I think it would come back as its normal creature for 5 mana. So you would get the Enters the Battlefield ability again, and it wouldn't have any counters on it, I believe. And then also there's sort of like Render Inert, which could remove the counters, and then you could, I believe, attack right away. I'm not 100% sure about all these rules interactions. Let me know in the comments below if these all work or not. But I think this is kind of how the card is going to work, and some of the sort of synergies that you could use with impending. And I'm assuming there's a lot of other impending cards coming. Haha, no pun intended. But if they do are all kind of templated similarly, maybe blinking or removing the counters could be useful with other ones as well. Okay, next up we've got the Wandering Rescuer, which is a 5-mana 3/4 with Flash and Convoke, double strike, and it says other tap creatures you control have hexproof. So the Wandering Emperor is going to rotate out, but now we got another thing to worry about when we're attacking into open mana or open creatures that could tap for it. Most notably, this has Convoke, so this is probably going to go just right into the red-white Convoke deck, or maybe even like a mono-white Convoke deck. But yeah, you can get this out on turn 2. If you go Novice Inspector on 1, Gleeful Demolition on 2, that gives you 4 creatures, and then just tap the 4 plus your second land, and or another white creature you play, and then just play this out on turn 2, which is pretty scary and gives all your other creatures, tap creatures, hexproof. So that is seems pretty good. It probably will see some play in the Convoke decks. Um, that's basically the only synergies I could really find with it, but it's not like this really needs that much help. This is I think a pretty good card that's going to see some play. All right, next up we got Fear of Missing Out. So the FOMO uh, card, which is pretty strong actually. I like this card. It's a 2 mana 2/3, and enters. You discard a card, draw a card. It's also an enchantment creature, so kind of notably it kind of synergizes with anything that would synergize with enchantment. And it has Delirium, so an old keyword which it says when it attacks for the first time, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So if you were able to get the Delirium on this card gives you an additional combat phase, but only untaps one of your creatures. So it could be good with like Vigilance creatures, I guess, to get an extra attack from them. But I was thinking about it's kind of like this: if you were able to get Delirium, and the first ability lets you sort of enable it a bit, but if you had like a fetch land or something on turn 1, and then Bobble, and then the second ability you just discarded something else, a creature, and then you went for Monstrous Rage plus Twinferno. So its ability kind of gives it double strike, but isn't actually double strike. It gets to attack twice. Um, but if you Monstrous Rage it, it would have 5 power, and then if you Twinfernoed it, it would have double strike, and then you would attack for 10, and then attack for 10 again. So that would be a turn 3 kill if you were able to get Delirium. So that's kind of what I was thinking about Fear of Missing Out. Let me know in the comments below if there's other kind of uses for this ability. It's a pretty powerful ability to get another combat phase on a creature, but it does only untap one of your creatures. So yeah, kind of interesting. All right, next up we've got the Screaming Nemesis, which is a 3 mana 3/3 spirit with haste. So kind of the going rate of 3 mana 3/3 for haste, but it has ability when it's dealt damage, deals damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. So it's a pretty strong card. It's almost like it can't really be blocked. If they do block it, then or like chump block it, then it kind of does its damage anyways. So really, really powerful effect. Some ways you can kind of like proactively use this, which is to do damage to itself. So maybe like Torch the Witness does a ton of damage to a specific creature. If you go this on, say, turn 3, and then Torch the Witness, you can already do 6 damage to it on turn 4, and then which would be redirected, to the face if you wanted to do that. Or Ill-Timed Explosion in Standard is pretty sweet. In older formats, there's some other cards that do like 20 damage to I think like Shivan Meteor does like 13 damage, things like that. um, but Ill-Timed Explosion in Standard, if you discard a really high cost card, can do I think like 15 to each creature. So that would be a pretty cool curve to do turn 3 Screaming Nemesis, turn 4 Ill-Timed Explosion. So that's a pretty good one. Okay, this card is very exciting. 6 black mana, so 6 mana for 6/6 flying. 666, of course. When it enters, if it was cast, each player exiles all but the bottom 6 cards of their library face down. And at the beginning of the upkeep, you draw a card. So the first thing I thought about this was just kind of it mills you. So maybe there's some combo there, but in Standard, just milling your opponent down to 6 cards is pretty good with Jace, because that can mill up to, well, you only need 2 counters on it to mill 6 cards with it. So you could, just play out the Jace on turn 3, turn 4, whatever, and plus it up a few times to defend it. And then if you could play this guy on turn 6, basically we'll win. Or maybe there's a way to cheat it out into play, such as the Shadowrite Priest. Don't forget about Shadowrite Priest. That can search your library for a black creature and put it directly into the battlefield. Actually, that actually doesn't work. oh well. It says if it was cast. So you could still put it into play as a giant flyer. That is fine, but you wouldn't get the effect from that. So scratch that. But maybe there is another way to kind of cast it from your graveyard. There's a blue card. Oh, let me know in the comments below now. What's the card that it's like triple blue in it? If you discard it at that turn, you can cast it from your graveyard for 4 mana. Anyways, that could work with that as a way to cheat this in. I think fight rigging is rotating, so we won't have that to do. But anyways, those are some options. There's also the Kirk, Son of Yawgmoth, which could play this for 0 mana and pay 12 life, which I thought was kind of funny. And maybe this is just good in a devotion deck. Certainly a way to cast it and then get a ton of more devotion. Yeah, let me know. There's probably a bunch of different uses for this guy, but I think Jace is probably the coolest sort of Splinter Twin combo with it. If you have Jace out, you just cast this and win the game. So, all right, let's see what else. We got Toby the Beastie Befriender, which is a 3 mana 1/1. When it comes into play or enters, it's a 4. You get a 4/4 white beast creature token, which this creature can't attack or block alone. And as long as you control 4 more creature tokens you control have flying. So there's a new card in Bloomburrow, the Salvation Swan, which can blink stuff. So this card is a great target to blink, and a nice curve to go like turn 3, get your guy, and then turn 4, hold up the Swan, blink it, get another uh, token. But also we have Gearhead, which is pretty good to kind of copy tokens. So if you had played like a creature on 2, Gearhead on 3, and then play this on 4, you could tap all your creatures and make more copies of these white beast creature tokens. So, pretty good. It's, 5 power, 5 toughness for 3 mana is pretty strong, and potentially flying for some of that. So I think this guy's got some potential. Yeah, let me know about this one. I'm not sure if there's any other combos I'm missing here, but seems like a pretty sweet one. Okay, next up we got Come Back Wrong, a 3 mana sorcery, destroy target creature. If a creature card is put into a graveyard this way, return it to the battlefield under your control, sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. So basically, you could use this on your opponent's creature as a removal spell, which is, pretty good. And if it had like an ETB effect or a sort of dying effect, then you would get that as well. So certainly a good use, but I wanted to think about how you could use this like proactively on your own stuff. For example, if you had like a Rakdos joins up and some legends out, you could, destroy your own legend, which would trigger the Rakdos joins up, and then it would come back, and then you'd sacrifice it again. It would trigger the Rakdos joins up again. It's pretty sweet with Hidetsugu and Kairi, because you would get both the enters the battlefield and the dies trigger. So you get the dies trigger. I mean, when you play the Hidetsugu, you get the enters, but then you'd play Come Back Wrong, you get the die trigger, and then it would come back again. You get the enter ability, and then it would be sacrificed. You get the die trigger again. Same is kind of true with the Gruff triplets, which would when it dies, you get counters on all the other tokens, and then it would come back and make more tokens, and then it would die and put more counters on all the tokens. So you get a huge board with Gruff triplets. So those are kind of the fun, probably pretty janky, but fun combos I thought about with Come Back Wrong. Yeah, let me know if there's any others I missed with this card. It seems like a pretty fun one. Not sure how competitive it will be, but maybe there's something else that'll come out that'll be really good with it too. Okay, next up we got Chainsaw, which is a 2 mana artifact equipment. When it enters, it deals 3 damage to up to 1 target creature. So kind of just a removal spell, which is decent. 2 mana for 3 damage is okay. And then when one more creature dies, you put a rev counter on it, and then equipped creature gets plus X plus 0. X is the number of rev counters on Chainsaw, equipped for 3. I thought all would be 1 would be a sweet combo here, because if you had all be 1, you could basically mow down your opponent's board completely if they had a bunch of 1 toughness creatures. You could play the Chainsaw, deal 3. It would kill something. It would put a counter on the Chainsaw, then that would trigger the all be 1. You could do 1 damage to another if they had a 1 toughness guy. that would kill it. It would put another counter on the chainsaw and basically, take out all of their 1 toughness creatures. So that would be kind of funny. Um, and the other thing is like maybe you just kind of use it as like sacrifice fodder or an artifacts matter deck, like because the ETB is pretty good, just doing 3 damage, and then you could just gleeful demolition it away and use it to have an artifact. There's lots of sort of artifact synergies in standard that you could just kind of put this in an artifact kind of theme deck. And then Fervent Champion came to mind because of the equip cost. Fervent Champion reduces the equip cost to to 0 basically. So you could go turn 1 champion, turn 2, maybe kill their guy, get a counter on this, equip for free. It would be buffed up by 1, and then anytime anything else dies, it continues to get more counters on it. So that could be like a nice little 1-2 punch there. Yeah, let me know any other thoughts about Chainsaw. Pretty cool equipment. There's a lot of other equipment synergy in standard too. There's not great equipment cards, like there's not tier 1, but there's some equipment matters cards too. So maybe this could find a home in that kind of deck. Cursed Recording, which is a 4-mana artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a time counter on it, and then if there are 7 or more time counters on it, remove those counters, and it deals 20 damage to you. So how would you want to play this? The next ability is you tap, and when you cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Very cool. So this can kind of, when you're thinking about what you want to copy, time warp effects, extra turn effects are always really good. If you like Fireballed for 10, that would be a pretty good one to copy. I just thought maybe there's like some spells that would untap this that you could copy, so you could keep using it over and over again in the same turn. Like if you tapped it to give its ability, then you cast a spell that untapped it, and that would copy that spell, something like that. I don't really know what's available, but actually just an idea that just popped into my head right now. The other idea is just to kind of use its first ability against your opponent. So you get it to 6 counters, you cast a spell, and then with the ability on the stack, you donate it to your opponent with Coveted Falcon, and then they gain control of it and does 20 to them. I think that works, right? Okay. So that sounded like fun, very against the odds, but you never know. I mean, I think this card is pretty strong actually, because being able to it's like copy, I don't know, at least 6 different instant or sorcery spells is a lot of card advantage. So even if you don't use it in that way, I think it's got some potential for sure. All right, let's see. Next up, we got the Layline of Hope, which is a 4-mana enchantment. Like all ley lines, if it's in your opening hand, you can start with it on the battlefield. If you would gain life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. And as long as you have at least 7 life more than your starting life total, creatures get +2/+2. So it's basically the Righteous Valkyrie effect. And it might be decent in a deck like a Righteous Valkyrie deck or other sort of Soul Sisters decks, kind of life gain creature decks. I think that would be kind of the natural home for it. You could turn this on pretty quickly with like Life Goes On or something that gains a lot of life pretty quickly. And then I also thought it would be pretty good with Zur as well, because cost 0 comes into play, but the mana cost is 4, and you could turn it into a creature, but it also kind of works with Zur because it gives it lifelink, and so it would gain additional life, but also if you got your life up, it would pump your whole team. So there's some cool synergy there with Zur. So maybe Zur is going to make a comeback in Standard at some point. I don't know if it actually ever had any sort of good deck in it, but maybe it'll be a sleeper that makes a comeback here. All right. Next up, we got Nowhere to Run, which is an enchantment, 2 mana with Flash. And when it enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3. Creatures your opponent's control can be the target of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof. And ward abilities of those creatures don't trigger. Kind of nice. This kind of sits in play, and if your opponent has a bunch of ward stuff, that can really just get around that. So that's useful. I thought it can also kind of be used as sort of fodder to bargain things, like with Beseech the Mirror. maybe it's good just to add to your devotion count with Nykthos. And then there's this card that looks Errant and Giada, which looks at the top card of your deck, and you can cast cards that have flash and kind of a removal spell. Usually removal spells are sorceries, but this actually does have flash, so you can use that with Errant and Giada if it was on the top of your deck. So maybe there's some Esper deck that would want that. Yeah, there's probably a lot of other uses for this. I think this is kind of pretty solid. Not sure if it'll see play, but maybe more of a sideboard card against sort of the ward hexproof decks, things like that. But yeah, pretty cool little removal spell. And then we got the Twitching Doll, which is very freaky and a spider artifact creature toy. 2 mana for a 2/2. Add 1 mana of any color, put a nest counter on it, and sacrifice it, create a 2/2 green spider creature token with reach for each counter on it. Notice it just says counter, not the number of nest counters, so any counter. Activate as a sorcery. So this would be a really cool card for Agatha's Soul Cauldron to put under the Soul Cauldron, also to use the Soul Cauldron to put counters on it, because it works with any number of counters. So the counters that it gets, but also other +1/+1 counters. You can get a bunch of spiders. Yeah, that's kind of the main synergy I thought of with Soul Cauldron. Maybe there's some other things. Anything that would like add +1/+1 counters to your whole team, things like that, would be pretty good with the Twitching Doll as well. Get a bunch of spiders. All right, and then I put this at the end, next to the 9 Lives Familiar, because I think there's some cool synergy here. So this is from a set that's going to come out, I think, at the end of the year. That's sort of Foundations, I believe, is what it's called. It's like a set that's going to be in standard for like 5 years at least. So we're going to see a lot of 9 Lives Familiar. No, maybe not, but I'll talk about the synergy first here. This is the idea that if you had a 9 Lives Familiar, and you had a Soul Cauldron with Twitching Doll on it. Let me read 9 Lives Familiar. It's a 3 mana 1/1. It comes with 8 revival counters on it, so it's got 9 lives. If you cast it, and when it dies, if it had a revival counter on it, you return to the battlefield with 1 fewer on it, so it comes back with 7, and then 6, and then 5, and then 4. But because Twitching Doll says number of counters on it, if you had a Soul Cauldron, Twitching Doll under the Soul Cauldron, and you gave its ability to 9 lives, and you sacrificed the 9 lives, it would then give you 8. It would give you 8 spider tokens, or maybe 9 because of the +1/+1 counter. 9 spider tokens, and then it would come back with 7 +1/+1 counters on it, and you could just like keep doing this every turn and get tons of spiders. Beyond that, you could just kind of use this as like sacrifice fodder for like braids every turn. And also, all will be one is kind of sweet with this. If you play all will be one and then you play this, you can do 8 damage to anything, and you can just chump block. It comes back, then you do 7 damage to anything. If it dies again, it does 6 damage to anything, because all will be one just counts the number of counters. It doesn't care what kind of counters they are. So some cool synergy there. And lastly, I believe is Omniscience, which is coming back to standard. This is an old card. It's legal in other formats, but I always want to think about ways you can cheat this into play. Repair and Recharge, Abrello's Awakening can bring it back for cheap. In the Bramble Familiar, there's ways to sort of get the the fetch quest ability of the Bramble Familiar. Like there's a plot card that lets you plot it, and then you can cast this, and then maybe you mill it. You mill the Omniscience, and that brings it back into play. So ways to cheat Omniscience into play is sort of the idea. Here, always a pretty sweet one to have for combos. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think about all these combos for Duskmourn and for Foundations. And again, I'll make a separate video for Bloomburrow in the next week or so, as we kind of start moving into different Bloomburrow spoilers. I think in a week or 2 weeks probably from now, we'll start up. So let me know if I missed any combos, what you think about these ones. Appreciate you watching. Hope you have a wonderful day.